everyone, welcome to week 4 of planning for your middle school language arts classroom. So if you're new here, this is a little series that I have where I help you plan for your middle school classroom and give you some ideas and tips and tricks that you can use with your students and kind of the flow of things that I do with my students that maybe you can copy or steal some ideas from to do with your students. So this week is super exciting because we are starting our first novel and we're starting to learn our active reading process, what I call jots or annotations. And so I'm really excited to start that with the students because it's something that we will use all year long in their notebook as they read. And they even do it on their end of grade test, which is what I think is part of the reason why I have such good scores, or my students have such good scores, because they are active readers, and that's what I start to teach with this first novel. So we're going to be doing active reading, we're going to be doing some pre-reading activities, and we're also going to be starting our novel. So let's get into it, what we're doing in week 4. Here we have week 4, and this week we are working with inference and text evidence. And we want students to be able to analyze the text in order to make inferences that can be supported with text evidence. So this week we are starting with a little different type of Bellringer. We're still using the same structure where students come in and they have a Bellringer. But instead of the question of the day, we're moving into something different. So it's still the same routine, it's just a different assignment. And this week, we're going to be working on the inference and text evidence Bellringer. These are part of the standards-based Bellringer series that I have. And let me show you what that looks like. So I have this in a Google slide, and I also have it on a Google Doc, but I think the Google slide is prettier to show you. So I'm going to show you that. But it starts out with, it has 4 sections, and then a check-in on the very last day, which you can use as a quiz. It gives them the vocabulary that they need, what inference means and what text evidence means. And then it has some scaffolded practice for them. So practice number 1 is reading a short passage and answering questions and highlighting text evidence to show the answers to the questions. Practice number 2 is reading the passage and answering inference-based questions and text evidence questions. Practice number 3, we start getting into higher order thinking. So they read this passage and then they write their own inference questions and text evidence questions. And they can always go back to this one to look at question stems on how to do it. And then practice number 4 is another higher level. It's one step up. In this one, they have to write their own passage where we have to infer the character trait based on the character's action and dialogue. So you're not going to come out and say, Savannah is really energetic. You're going to show us that through the actions and dialogue. So we have to infer it as a reader. So they'll write their question here and then write answer or multiple choice questions to go with it. So this is a higher order thinking one, and it might have to be finished for homework. And then on Friday, practice number 5 is actually a check-in. Let me show you what that looks like. It looks like this. It's a 10-question check-in that can be used as a quiz grade. It's also a great way to see if students are picking up what you're putting down and understanding inference. So it starts with basic vocabulary, and then it goes into inferring character traits, which we have been practicing, and then text evidence. It's just all the things that we have been talking about. So it gives them passages and then asks questions based on the passage, inference and text evidence questions. I also have this on a Google form, so it grades it for me. So that is the Bellringer for the whole entire week. So every day they come in and they do a piece of the Bellringer. Then after that, you're going to continue with what you started last week, which is the vocabulary. So we're starting to set up really strong systems. You know, the content that you do is different, but the organization is the same. And that's exciting to me because the students start getting into a flow and you can get more done because you have this structure. Anyway, so you're going to do the vocabulary, and I'm just going to go right into vocabulary number 2. They're going to write down the words. I'm going to teach it to them, and then they'll work on the activity sets throughout the week. And then on Friday, they'll have their quiz. For this next part, If you have one of those juicy 90-minute classes like I used to have, you're so lucky because you can do a lot with that. You can do a standards-based differentiation time. I love that. But unfortunately, we got rid of that at my school. But what they did instead is they added in an intervention block. So I take the standards RX time and I put that into the intervention block. So we are differentiating based on their ability. I do have a video where I talk about standards RX. So that is linked in the description below. If that's something that you're interested in, if you're interested in differentiating for your students, that is a good option right there, is the standards RX. So I would highly encourage you to check that out. Also, alternatively, if you do not want to read novels with your students, if you just want to work in stations and do differentiation the whole time, I would also check out the Standards RX because that will show you how to do it and how to manage it. Those are just options for you. Okay. This week, we are starting on our first novel, which for me in 7th grade is going to be the novel Ghost. I wanted to start with a realistic fiction novel. I love Ghost. I think students can see themselves in the characters. Their lives aren't perfect, they're realistic. I love it. So we start with that one. But before we can start reading, I have a couple of different activities that I like to do. First is the author focus. So we look at the author of the story, how his ideas help write the story, how his background, where he comes from, helps shape the story. I think that's important to figure out before we start reading. I have some pre-reading stations and I'm going to talk to you about them here. So let me show you some of the investigating author stations that I have made, and like everything, I'm super excited about this. So let me show you what I'm going to have the students do to investigate the author, figure out about the author before we start reading our novel. I have everything set up for the author that we're going to be doing first, which is Jason Reynolds. But this will give you an idea, some activities that you can do to investigate an author. So first, I'm going to have some little cards, like task card type things, and the students are going to read through all the fact cards, and then they're going to write down which one was the most surprising or interesting, and they have a worksheet for this. And then thinking about the collection as a whole, what did you learn about the author? So like, what type of person is he, and that kind of thing. So for my second station, I'm going to do an author interview. I found this interview. They're not going to watch it in its entirety, but I'm going to put on the worksheet what time frames I want them to watch. And then they are going to write down what they learned about it, and then what's your impression of the author, thinking about the interview as a whole. The third station, they're going to have a collection of book covers from the author. So they're going to look at visual elements and then compare and contrast them. They're going to consider the emotional impact of the covers, like the colors, imagery, the typography. Does it convey a specific mood or tone, or how do the covers help the reader connect to the author's style, if at all? So they're going to analyze the covers. I'm excited about that. Then I am going to have them do a social media deep dive. Of course, they're not going to get on the social media thing. I've created like an Instagram profile, and I've dropped pictures in from our author, Jason Reynolds' Instagram page. And so I want them to analyze the images, what posts would they comment on, and thinking about it as a collection, as a whole, what can you determine about the author's personality? Finally, I'm going to have them analyze first lines. So I have one here from Ghost. But what I'm going to do is I have first lines written on different cards. And so they're going to put them in order from what they like the most to what they like the least, or one that has the strongest hook to the least strongest. And so they're going to write about what they think is the strongest and why. And then if they could tell anything about the author's style of writing based on the collection of opening lines. So I'm doing this as station activities, so students will be going around to each station. I have 5 of them, and they'll be doing each of these different activities with a group. Now, I did mine for Jason Reynolds. You could do yours for any author that you want, but those are just some ideas of how you could set up your stations. After our pre-reading stations, we have Inference exit tickets. Again, everything we do is focused on the standard. We can dive deep into our text and look at the text through the lens of our standards. So we are always circling everything back to our standard. It creates, I think, a deeper understanding of the material. Let me show you what my Inference exit tickets look like. I do have these on Google Form and Google Doc. Google Form's just easier for me. And what the students do is they read an excerpt from something that is on the public domain. I don't know about how your state does their end of grade testing, but if you're in North Carolina, a lot of our end of grade testing passages are on the public domain. That means that they're a little bit more difficult because it's written in like the 1800s, and that's not how we speak anymore. And it's written at a different pacing than what we communicate now. And it's awkward, and the students kind of get lost in it. So we have to do a little bit of practice with it, and I like to use as exit tickets as that practice. It gives them a little snapshot of the classic literature, the literature that's on the public domain. And then I have inference and text evidence questions to go with it. It's a great way to see if they are understanding inference, and a great way to practice those stories and passages that might be a little bit more challenging for our students, but it's not in an overwhelming format. So those are the exit tickets. I started those last week, and we are continuing with them this week. I have 5 of them for the students. That is Monday. And then we're going to pop over here to Tuesday. Same thing. We're starting out with that inference and text evidence practice number 2. Then they're automatically going to roll into the activity sets for vocabulary. What I would do is I would have my Bellringer timer put up. I would also have an answer key available for the practice number 2. So as students complete it, they can come up and get the answer key and check themselves, or you can go to the students and check their work for them. And that way they can get that immediate feedback. That's an option. Then when they finish that, then I would have a timer for morphology and vocabulary, about 7 to 10 minutes to work on their activity sets for the day. And you can walk around and help students as needed. Then again, if you have that juicy intervention time, this is a great time to do that differentiation. Then we're going to roll into another station activity. Yesterday we did author focus. Today we're going to do a novel focus station. So students can start to get interested in our novel and get their curiosity kind of stirred about what's going to happen. So let me talk about those here. So after we do our author investigations, I like to do a little pre-reading investigation so they can start to get, being the students, can start to get familiar with the book and have some context before we jump into the first chapter. So these are the activities that I do to help my students get interested and engaged in the book. So this is our novel pre-reading investigation, and I have it set up for our first novel, which is Ghost. And so the first thing they're going to do is they're going to look at the book cover and title. They're going to think about the mood of the colors and the images, and they're going to predict what the book's going to be about based on that kind of stuff. And then they're going to read the back of the book, and then they're going to judge it. Do they think they're going to like it based on the cover and the blurb? Next, they're going to do, but first let's read. So they're going to read the first page of the book. And then they're going to talk about the emotions and feelings they get from that page, what questions they have, and then what kind of predictions can they make based on the first page. After that, I want them to watch the book trailer. So this is a cute little 2-minute trailer that I found for Ghost. And then they're going to talk about the conflicts and challenges that come up for the character during the trailer, what questions or predictions they have, and are they more interested in reading it after seeing a visual representation of it. From there, we're going to do anticipation table talk. So it's like an anticipation guide, but we're going to have a discussion around it. So each group's going to have discussion cards. They're going to flip them over, and it's based on the themes in the book. Like, do you think our identity comes from the people that we're surrounded by? And that kind of stuff. So we're going to have no right or wrong answers with these questions. It's all about your personal opinions, and we're going to respect everybody's opinion. And I want the students to back it up with their own personal experiences. And then once everyone shares their thoughts about a certain discussion card, they're going to flip over another one. So anticipation guides, but changing those to anticipation table talks. And then finally, what's in the bag investigation. You've probably seen this one all over the place, but it's a good one. For this one, they're actually going to have a duffel bag with items related to the book. And so they're going to analyze the items in the bag. And then they're going to think about it as a whole. So like if they look at the whole of the collection, what predictions can they make about the characters in the story or what happens in the story? And then how do they think the journey for the character is going to unfold just solely based on the items in the back? And if they were going to write a short story based on the items in the back, what would it be about? So this is all about getting students interested in the book to, increase their curiosity, make them want to read it instead of just jumping right in. So they're like invested now after they do these stations. So I would set these up as stations, maybe 5-ish, 6-7 minutes at each station, and then they will rotate around until they get through all the pre-reading activities. After our stations, I'm going to give the students their last inference and text evidence exit ticket. But this time they should be super comfortable with working with inference questions because of what we've been doing all week and last week. So that should be reflected in this final inference exit ticket. It should make your teacher heart happy. If you see students are struggling, it'll be a great time to pull them and talk to them during your intervention time. Let's move on to Wednesday. Great flow is happening in your classroom. Students are coming in. They have the 3 minutes to get their stuff out. They're doing their inference and text evidence Bellringer. You're checking it and they're rolling right into their vocabulary when they are done. After that, again, standard space time if you have time. If not, save that for your intervention block. Here we're going to continue with what we started week 3, which is teaching those active reading strategies. And today we're going to teach hashtags, which students love because it kind of is speaking their language, right? So we might do some hashtags about how a character feels about a situation, or hashtags about a character's personality and how they're acting. And that will help us answer our inference question down here. And our inference question might be like, what can we determine about the character based on the events in the story, or something like that. Then before we start reading, because today we're starting with chapter 1 of our novel. And for me, I do not teach novels. Like, I'm not teaching Ghost. What I'm doing is I'm teaching the standard inference and text evidence using our novel Ghost. So we always have to have an objective, a goal before we start reading. We're not just going to read to read. We have an objective for reading. So let me talk about my target objective slides here. Before we start reading, I always start with the target objective because I want my students to know why we are reading. We're not just reading for fun. Yes, that's part of it, but we're reading with a purpose. There's a reason why we're reading, and it always correlates with our standard that we are focused on. Let me show you what it looks like. So this is my target objective slide. I just change it almost every other day, every day, depending on what we're working on. So students will be able to analyze the events in the story in order to understand more about a character. So this is going to be about inferring character traits based on the actions of the character in the story and what they did. That will be their RTQT question. And I tell them this is what we're going to look at. So if we are doing hashtags, we'll do hashtags about how the character felt about what happened in the story. And then we can use that to determine their character traits. I do keep the objective slide up on the board so we can have that like front and center while we're reading, so we do not lose focus on why we are reading our novel. And then we will stop and jot based on the objective. And then we flow right into reading our first chapter. When we're doing this, I'm stopping at natural spots and I am modeling how to do these annotations. We have a jot, I call it a jot board in our notebook. Usually it's 4 to 6 jot spaces, 4 to 6 boxes, and students are jotting while we read. So we read together, we stop together, we jot together. And I'm talking about it. I'm modeling it. I'm like, what hashtags can we do about the character here? If we were going to infer some things about our main character based on his actions, what hashtags can we do? What hashtags can we do for the other characters, the side characters in our novel, right? So we are modeling this. the students are starting to understand it, and we're practicing our standard. We're inferring about the characters based on their actions, and we're doing hashtags about it. So it all kind of comes together here when we're reading. So I read out loud. I do the voices. Yes, I'm a middle school teacher, and I read out loud because students need to hear that. They do not hear it enough. I'm about to get on my soapbox, I feel like. But when I have students start to read their dialogue, or if I assign dialogue parts, students don't know when to start and stop. They don't realize when one character stops talking and another one starts. So if they're reading independently and they do not have the skill of knowing when one character starts and stops and another one starts, then they're not going to understand what is happening in the story. At least that is my experience with teaching middle school. So I have found I have to read it out loud. I read the character voices so students can start to see what is happening, how the flow is happening of the story. It's super helpful, but we always have to make sure that students are following along. I do have whole reading class expectations where heads are up. I also have them heads up, eyes on the page, and I say, you read the words as I read them out loud. You read the words in your head as I read them out loud. So everybody's eyes are on the page, and as I read, I'm circling around the classroom. I'm going to make a video about how I do this because I feel very passionate about it, apparently. And so I want to share that with you because I think that's one of the reasons why our test scores, at least in my classroom, are so high. We have a lot of growth. It's because students are starting to see, our students who don't read a lot are starting to see how things are coming together, and they are getting the fluency and the flow of reading a novel. Anyway, soapbox off. Okay, so we are reading chapter 1 of Ghost, and then after that, after we read, stop, jot chapter 1, we do one inference question, maybe two if you have an awesome class or some time. But our one inference question is going to be like, what can the reader infer about the character based on the events in the chapter? Go. And they have to follow it. They have to answer it following the RTQT method that we learned in week 2. So they are using text evidence to support their inference, which aligns to our goal, and everything is working, and your teacher heart is so happy. And then at home, they can finish what's needed. Moving on to Thursday, y'all, it's rinse and repeat here. We have great flow and structure. Students are working on their Bellringer, then morphology. Then if you have your standards-based time, you can work on it there. Today we're adding in another annotation, which is conflict. And it's all about the problems. We talk about problems, how we all have them, and our main character definitely has some problems in the book. And so we'll be focusing on that today. So when we read and stop and jot, we will do some doodles, we'll do some questions, we'll do some hashtags, and then we'll add in the main problem of the story. We look at our target objective slide. Our target objective for this might be, what inference can we make about how the character feels about the problem or the conflict that's happening? I don't know. I just made that up off the top of my head. So we review that target objective. So that's in their mind. And then we read chapter 2. And when we read chapter 2, we stop and we jot. We read together, we stop together, we jot together. And then, just like yesterday, they'll answer a different RTQT question and then complete at home if needed. And then they will study for their vocabulary quiz, because Friday is a little bit different. Friday, they're going to do their check-in. They're going to roll into their vocabulary quiz, and then they're going to read independently. And when I have days like this, I'll have an agenda slide or a to-do slide where I list everything out. And it's just a Google slide where I'm like, first, do your inference and text evidence Bellringer check-in. Second, do your morphology quiz and vocabulary quiz. Third, read chapter 3 and do the questions that go with it. So they can see it. I keep it up on the smart board so they are not just sitting there right? They know what to do. And this is a great time for you to get caught up on whatever you need to get caught up on. That is it. That is week 4. It sounds really exciting. There's a lot going on, but once you get into the flow of things, time just moves so quickly in your classroom, and your students are gonna be like, wow, is it already time to go? And you're gonna be like, yes, it is. And it's just gonna be such a positive and encouraging environment for them, where they're moving, learning, and super excited to be there. Now, if you want some of these resources, if it is available on Teachers Pay Teachers, then that is linked below. Everything, including all of these lesson plans, or all of these planning guides, and the resources that go with them, are on ELA Unlimited, where you can get all of this great stuff, download what you need, when you need it, one low price. That is linked below. It's like the hub for middle school language arts teachers. You have to check it out. Linked below. If you have any questions, just let me know, and I'll see you next week for week